Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
All right, so here we are, Bloomberg Invest, downtown Manhattan. You're back in the heart of the city, man. Mellody Hobson, she has quickly become one of the most influential people across the sports world. She's got a new fund.
It's no surprise to me that she now has entered the world of sports, and she's building a world-class team.
So Denver Broncos and the Denver NWSL team. She's in League One volleyball, Chicago White Sox. She's all in on sports like we are. Let's go talk to Mellody Hobson.
Let's do it.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone. I should point out, I think we're getting people post-cocktails. So, let's let it rip. I mean,
okay.
It's go time. Well, welcome, everyone, to this very special edition of The Deal with Alex Rodriguez and Jason Kelly, featuring the incomparable Mellody Hobson. First of all, I should say you race downtown because you do so much for the Bloomberg empire. You're part of the Bloomberg Philanthropies Board, so thank you for your service. And we're happy to have you here in this platform as well.
Thank you for having me.
One of the really fun things about prepping for this, and this happens with a lot of our shows, is one of us, usually this guy, knows the guests previously.
Yes, we know each other.
Tell us this story.
Well, it was really interesting. Hi, Mellody, and hi,
Hello.
everyone. It was, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, I was still playing with the Yankees, and we're playing the White Sox. And mutual friend introduced Mellody and I emailed her and I said, may I come see you for an hour, have an hour right before the game? And I thought she may be out of town or busy. She's running a big firm. And she said, of course, how's, 1 o'clock on Friday? And I show up to the meeting, and it's her and John Rogers, her partner. And I was just fascinated by this partnership. And one of the key takeaways for me, and I still think about it today, is A, your chemistry, your mutual respect, your competitive advantage that you both have as far as complementary set of skills. What is it about that relationship? And thank you for taking that meeting because it really impacted me. What was it about this partnership that's worked so well for you and John?
Okay, let's first of all start off that Alex Rodriguez calls you at work and says, can I come and see you? Yes, right? Everyone excited in the office, of course. And he does show up, and he's like, the Adonis that walks in is like, oh, nice to meet you.
Mellody, we don't need any
But
more.
it is all true.
Come on.
That part
I have
is
to
true.
live with this.
They were excited. I was excited. But we ended up having this phenomenal conversation about investing and the stock market and a whole host of things. And, of course, he was very, very impressive. So I'll stop there. John Rogers started our firm, Ariel Investments, and we are one of the oldest, minority-owned firms in the country. And he's one of the longest-running stock pickers in our category, which is small cap value. And he started the firm, but it became mine along the way. Yep. I mean, I have to tell you, it's a unique thing in terms of how much I loved it and how much I loved working with him and how much I wanted to be there. I've only had one job in my entire life, which is at Ariel. And I've worked there since I graduated from Princeton. And supposedly you have 11 jobs in your lifetime. I've only had one, and I'm the only person in my graduating class of 1,100 people who has had the same work phone number since I graduated from college.
Wow.
So obviously I like it there. I'm very loyal. But what I would say is that John and I knew very early on that he was extremely special. That I had found a person who was going to bring out the best in me without changing who I was, and who was a sharer. He played team sports, and he shares. And so we are co-leaders of Ariel, which is very rare. I don't understand why there aren't more co-CEOs, but we are co-leaders. And I think it works because we are complementary in our skills. We're very different. We have different parts of the firm that we run. We are deferential to each other, and yet at the same time, we hold our ground. And last but not least, and it's a rare thing to say in business, we love each other. We really do. He's like my brother. Jamie Dimon calls me his work wife. I'm like, brother. But we do share, our lives are sort of back and forth. If he asks me for something, it's a done deal. And if I ask him for something, and even in our worst moments, John said something to me once when we had a tough conversation and kind of a fight. He was like, Mellody, remember one thing. I know you want the best for Ariel, and you know I want the best for Ariel. If we always remember that, we can solve whatever differences we have.
Wow.
Love that.
I always want the best for the deal.
Me too.
Okay, thank you. So you mentioned something really interesting, which gives us a nice segue into a lot of what we want to talk about, which is the team sport. Now, I'm not sure anybody predicted that not only would you go into sports, you would pretty quickly become one of the most influential investors, like straight out of the gate, in professional sports. How did that happen?
It was a long and winding road.
Okay. We're here for it. We're here for the journey.
We've had investments in sports over the years. We've owned Madison Square Garden as it evolved into various versions of itself. But that investment goes back to 2011.
Right.
We bought that stock during the basketball lockout when there was right before Linsanity. Remember Jeremy Lin? When they were doing this retrofit of the garden, it was way over budget. And people were very skeptical of the name, and we're value investors. John went and visited the garden, and he said, you can't rebuild this anywhere in New York. This is a great investment, and it ended up being a wonderful investment for us. We own Manchester United, the European soccer team. So we've been in the publicly traded sports area that we think of as media, a media business.
Interesting.
And then personally, I crept into sports. So secretly, and Alex knew this, I bought into the Chicago White Sox years ago, but I swore all the owners to secrecy.
Yeah.
I said, you can't ever talk about it. I told the commissioner, because I didn't want anyone to confuse it with Ariel. And then John Rogers had been a longtime owner of the Chicago Sky from 2005 when they came to Chicago.
Right.
And then for me, the news around me in sports was when I bought into the Broncos.
Right, of course.
Why? They're great businesses. You realize the uniqueness of these assets and the value that is being created in these businesses, and the fandom and the sponsorships and the media rights, all of it very quickly became clear to me. Wow.
Yeah.
And I then realized and had someone say to me about a year and 15 months ago, women's sports. And I've been doing a little bit in women's sports as well, quietly.
Right.
WNBA investment, and then also League One volleyball.
Yeah.
And that on my own, just dabbling. And when they said women's sports, I started to study women's sports like an 11-year-old studies baseball statistics. And I got dangerous in seeing up arrows on what was happening in attendance, in sponsorships, in media rights, in girls playing starting at young ages. Everything was pointing in the direction. 8.4 million kids in high school play sports. 41% of them are girls now, which most people don't realize how that gap is narrowed. Affordability of women's sports. Very expensive to go to some of the games that are out there, especially in the big cities. The women's attendance and the women's games often are more affordable for families, and it's unbelievable and an unbelievable experience because the women are so talented. And then, of course, you saw this inflection point. You saw the NCAA finals last year with Caitlin Clark, 5 million more viewers for the women's finals than the men. And then we've seen it in so many other areas. Think about the Olympics and the big names. No disrespect. Lots of amazing athletes, but some of the women were the biggest names. And I just said, we're going to drill down on this, and ultimately saw a real opportunity. And I said, go big or go home.
Always.
Let's do a big fund in this area.
I do have a follow-up on that, Mellody, because I've been studying you and John Rogers for years. And you have your turtle, which means you guys are patient and you're selective. And when you see a big pitch, you go for the fences. But you've made a lot of money in your firm over the years and being a contrarian. And I believe you've taken that from Warren Buffett, right? In sports right now, you're not necessarily being a contrarian. How do you apply that philosophy into sports because there's so much capital flowing through it.
I love this question so much. So first of all, I talked about our early beginnings were investing in undervalued small and medium-sized companies that showed a strong potential for growth. That is women's sports. I call it the small caps of sports. The most valuable women's sports team today is worth $250 million, and that's Angel City that was bought by Bob Iger and Willow Bay. The most valuable men's sports team is the Dallas Cowboys that's worth $11 billion. There's a dramatic difference between $250 million and $11 billion, which is why I'm calling them the small caps. Small caps because smaller companies tend to grow faster. And we say the big guys, it's going to be harder to grow the way they've grown in the past. But the women have a big trajectory of growth in front of them. So this is where value meets growth.
And so the first big deal that you do, I believe, is expansion in the NWSL, the Denver team, a market obviously you're familiar with. Walk us through that deal. I mean, we've interviewed several NWSL owners, including Randy Chastain over at Bay FC. We both know Willow Bay very well and her investment thesis and Bob's on Angel City. What was the case here? Because those expansion fees, while, yes, on a dollar per dollar basis low, those expansion fees have grown very fast. I mean, we've seen it over the years. So walk us through that case.
Okay, so this came to us in a very unusual way. So after the Broncos deal, a lot of people have just come to me on sports, just personally thinking, maybe you would look at this. Lots of teams, lots of opportunities. So I'm giving a speech in Florida at a conference. 2 people come up to me at the end of the speech. We have not announced what we're doing in sports, and we just have this skunkworks group working on this inside of Ariel. We hadn't even told our firm. Wow. So there were only 2 or 3 of us working, maybe 3, working on this. So 2 people came up to me. One said, I'm trying to do a WNBA expansion team. And the other said, I'm working on an NWSL soccer team. It was just fortuitous because I knew what we were working on, right? I followed up with both of them. And Denver, we started to do the research on Denver. We looked at, first of all, the market. And we looked at the demographics of the market, which seemed to be very, very favorable to women. Think outdoor. We also looked at the socioeconomic, the average income in the city. That was favorable to season ticket sales. We learned of the locations of a potential stadium. We did a lot of work on why do we need a stadium? Why wouldn't we? And then we saw the stadium made sense. We got excited about stadium rights. I always knew stadium rights made the ownership more valuable because of the other events and the like. And so there was a lot there that was just adding up. And then we said, we need to come in big, and they were willing to move the cap table around for us. And ultimately, I will say we saw the lead investor, Rob Cohen, and thought, this is a good guy. He's been able to demonstrate success in the building of his own business. And when we did the work on the opportunity, we said, the math looks good. And I always say math has no opinion. You follow the math. Now, just to give you a sense of why we think we're right, in 3 days of publicly announcing, we sold 5,200 season tickets.
Wow.
Now, since then, that number has gone up a lot more. And I have to tell you, that was way past our best case scenarios and even our own modeling. We also are launching a team with sponsorships in hand. There are a number of things that we're doing that just were unprecedented. Why were we okay with the expansion fee, which has gone up? Mm-hmm. We're turtles. Mm-hmm. We're thinking long term. As I've gone out to people, I said, my strong belief is you want to own these teams in a decade or two. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. They will be very valuable businesses. The other reason that we were comfortable, we were the 16th team to expand. Mm-hmm. I call it Sweet 16. We looked at the expansion fee and realized the owners of the team share the future expansion fees. Mm-hmm. So that puts a floor on even your valuation if you think out how those teams will expand over time. Then you get the upside from the media rights and things like that. And even though the media rights, they will be renegotiated soon, they don't get locked into the same kind of 10-year contracts that other sports do, because many of the women's leagues have been able to negotiate deals where they can reopen negotiations with viewership milestones.
Yeah.
So you're in soccer when it comes to this fund. Where else are you looking? Is this mostly team stakes? Is it the ecosystem? Like, what's sort of the window of
We have
opportunity
three buckets.
here?
We start off with major league sports, so owning teams. Then we've, obviously accomplished that first with Denver, and we're looking in other areas. We'd like to also be in Europe, by the way, not just in America. The next bucket we have is, we call it emerging leagues and junior sports.
Okay.
The junior sports is a powerful business because of the number of young people and the family's commitments to sports is huge. And then the last areas we see as related or ancillary businesses that benefit or grow through the growth of women's sports.
Ariel is one of the top tier firms in the country, around the world, right? And John and you are both, world-class investors. But if I'm an institution and I'm coming to Ariel, I'm saying, okay, what do you guys know about sports? One, I know you're building a world-class team, but how do you source deals? And are you confident that you can get enough deals for Ariel and for your investors?
Well, first of all, I have to tell you, what we're saying right now is Jason Wright, who's running this for us, who's a superstar.
Huge get.
Superstar. Everyone's asking me, how did you get Jason? Jason, if he were here, he would tell you the fish are jumping in the boat. Sourcing deals is not our problem. One of the reasons that I think we have a distinct advantage is that the leagues want gender and racial diversity and ownership. Notwithstanding the mood of some of the conversation that is going on in our country, if you're starting women's teams and leagues, it would be great to have some women and people of color involved. And I think they see that that's a priority. It's really important. And then to be able to go in with the resources and at scale, I think is very, very helpful. And I think they see a couple of things with us, which is different. If you're starting a team from scratch, like Denver, Jason ran the Commanders, has that experience. We bring operating expertise to the conversation where you don't have to learn trial by error. So everything from recruiting the leadership, it's this recruiter and it's this person at this firm. That's the way the conversation goes, as opposed to there are 5 firms in front of us, what should we do? Or you're building a stadium and Jason has had that experience. So this operational excellence is highly valued. And that I think is being sought after. I also think our brand and reputation is helping people to come to us where they say they have access to lots of people, relationships. That might mean sponsorships. That might be a whole host of things that we can lean into and help in the growth because it will be in our best interest.
And so let's talk about Jason Wright for a second. This is a name, just to give the audience who doesn't know who he is a little bit of backstory. Played in the NFL.
7 years.
Worked at McKinsey. I believe, went to
Youngest partner at McKinsey.
Exactly. Then goes to run the Washington Commanders. No slouch.
First black president of an NFL team in 105 years.
Right.
And if you can run the Commanders in that era, you're doing something.
You can. There's nothing that can surprise
Successfully.
you. Yes, very successfully. So what are the conversations? How do you get to him? How does he get to you? Like, how does that come together?
Okay. He's on a panel at a conference that I'm hosting, and we have presidents and CEOs of teams, Seth Marshall, Kevin Warren,
Dallas Mavericks, Chicago Bears.
Exactly.
Like, these are high caliber
Jason
people.
is there, and all of a sudden I am listening to him, and I've been working on this project. It's September, and I was like, I got to get to him. So I go up to him at just an event like this, and I said, I need to spend time with you. And he's looking at me like I have 3 heads, and I'm very aggressive about it. And by the next week, we are meeting in New York.
Wow.
And I said, I have this idea, and I know you are very much in demand. And I had heard he was leaving. That was public. And I said, I think we're going to do something that is literally a game changer. And I think you would be great working with us. And so we spent a little bit of time going back and forth. Not a lot, actually. You'd be shocked. And within a few weeks, he hadn't totally committed, but I kept tossing him things. I'm like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? So he jokes
He was
that
working
like,
for you before you even said yes.
Absolutely. I'm not sure how Josh Harris will feel about that. But occasionally I'm like, look at this. What do you think?
Yeah.
And within just a very short amount of time, he signed on. And I told him, I said, I can't tell you how committed I am to this, and I can't tell you how hard I'm going to work. You're going to look through and find the best opportunities, and I will find the money. That is the deal that we have. So I'm our chief cheerleader and fundraiser.
I like that.
And he's our quarterback.
So Mellody, one of the things that our audience has probably not been able to see in a pitch. I recently had a drink with Rob Walton, your partner, and he's thrilled to have you. Obviously, you make a great partnership.
Oh, no, the Denver Broncos.
I'm sorry, Denver Broncos. My question is, what was it about the pitch when you heard it that you said, was it the P&L? Was it
Broncos?
the forecast? Yes, the Broncos. Was it the forecast? Was it the growing
The
league?
math on again.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about what got you excited.
So the initial call came through and it said, would you ever consider investing in the Broncos? Honest answer, I said no. I was like, why? No, I'm not going to do that. I'm so busy and no. And then my friend Casey Wasserman and Jeffrey Katzenberg cornered me at a breakfast and sat down at a table because both were very close to Greg Penner, who I knew very well. We were on a board together. And they said, Mellody, you are the person to do this. And so, I'm sitting there and I'm being very open and I'm like, maybe I don't see something. And the no wasn't out of this is a bad idea. The no was out of capacity and a whole host of things. And Casey got me and he's like, Mellody, you know how you feel about financial literacy? What if you have like this model for a team on financial literacy? And he's like, it's been your mission. And I was like, oh, that's good. So that became the hook. I was like, wow, that would be so great. And
wait, explain that.
The idea that the athletes could be helped and that there could be a conversation about financial literacy in a different way. That was something that was really, really appealing to me. And then we started to do the work on the opportunity and the financial aspects of it. And I saw how compelling it was. Now, at the time, the Waltons made it clear, Penner Waltons, we're buying the team.
Yeah.
I mean, they were like, we're buying the team. And it's like, no matter what.
And they kind of cleared the deck, right?
They were like,
everyone
we're
ran the other way.
buying the team. So, you're sitting, riding sidecar with someone who's like, we're buying the team. And you're like, okay, we're buying the team. And first of all, I knew Greg and I knew how talented he was. And I knew Carrie. I'd gotten to know Carrie. I met Rob first over Zoom, and this is such a great story. So Rob and I are on the phone, and they have to like me, and I have to like them because this is real money, and we're in business together, and hopefully it'll be a multi-generational asset. I'm on the phone with Rob, and I said, Rob, he explaining to me how much he loves cars, and I was like, my husband loves cars, and he loves cars more than anything, and he said, he has this. Rob's talking about his car collection. And I said, oh, my husband's favorite car is this birdcage Maserati. And he was like, I have 2 of them.
Oh. Quick flex.
So George, I go and I say, George, Rob Walton has 2 birdcage Maseratis. And George is like, will they throw one in with the investment?
That would be a never before seen little sweetener for a deal. That's
it ended
pretty
up
amazing.
we had so much in common.
Yeah.
And that also, I felt like I was working with people of high integrity, which was really important to me. You don't spend your whole life building your reputation and your brand to have it, go down the drain because of an affiliation. And that affiliation, I was like, these are best in class business people, philanthropists. They are low key, extremely low key. And as a result of that, it fit. And I said to them, and I wasn't joking, I said, we don't need Super Bowl tickets. This isn't why we're doing this.
Right.
We're doing this, I'm going to be an investor and I'm excited to do this. And we have our ownership meetings with Lewis, who I brought in with us.
Lewis Hamilton.
Yes. Lewis is like a little brother. And I said, you should consider bringing Lewis. And, considering the number of followers that he has, and he loves sports, and he's a global sporting legend.
Huge star, yeah.
And then Condi Rice, obviously, is a legend in a different way as the first Black woman Secretary of State, a football nut.
Right.
Her father was a coach.
Remember at
there
Augusta?
was so much there that he glued us all together, and it's been it's exceeded my expectations, and financially, it's been a great investment.
I'm glad you mentioned Lewis because, first of all, and I hope I have this right, I read something a couple years ago about how you were one of the first calls that he made or he took after that fateful race in Abu Dhabi. You, and I say this, sitting alongside this guy, you have had access and relationships with some of the most interesting and influential athletes in the world. What have you learned from them?
So first of all, it wasn't a call. We were in Abu Dhabi.
Oh, you were there. Oh,
so
man.
This was a debate George and I had back and forth. Lewis and I are very, very close. And I met him in his rookie season, and he calls me sis, and I call him Sir Little Brother. and so literally, even in our email, Sir Little Brother, he calls me sis. We debated going to Abu Dhabi. It's the last race. They're tied, remember?
Right.
Exactly.
Lewis and Max Verstappen are tied.
They're tied. It's, this is the potential 8th championship, never been done before. The 7th was Lewis is tied with Michael Schumacher. And George is like, I'm like, should we go or should we not go? He's like, there's nothing worse than your family showing up when you have to work. No, we should not go. I hate that idea. And I was like, maybe we should go. And so we came up with a decision that we would go, but not tell him that we were there.
Oh, wow.
And so the reason that I wanted to go is I said, it's not if he wins. It's if he loses. I said, we're going in case he loses.
Nice.
But we're not telling him we were there. So the team put us in a special spot. He never knew we were there the whole weekend.
Wow.
And it was only when he lost that we thought he had won. Remember, it's the last half of the last lap. We're like, and he loses. And we go to his room, and he's devastated, as you would be, and doesn't quite understand what has happened. It was a very important moment because that was when he went and shook Max's hand.
Right.
And George had this famous quote that I've told people where he said, heroes are bigger than champions. He's like, Lewis went to hero status in that moment because that is hard for anyone to do with that level of disappointment. And what I've learned from Lewis, who I tell him all the time, I'm so fortunate that I have these good guys in my life, like John Rogers and Lewis, and George. But what I tell Lewis, I say, you are my mind's friend. When I am really struggling, I conjure up Lewis. And what I say about Lewis, he never, ever, ever gives up. Ever. And he has taught me things where he hits me right between the eye with his lesson. One of which, he came and spent some time with us. We were in the Caribbean, and he said, Mellody, let's go jet skiing. And I said, I can't go jet skiing. And he looks at me and he said, I've been here for 3 days, and you've said can't 4 times. He said, you choose not to.
Wow.
And he's like, can't is not a word you use. You choose not to. He said, your language is very important, Mellody. And you have a young child. You choose not to. So I looked at him and I said, well, I choose not to jet skiing with you. But it was a moment. And then the second thing he taught me, he said, he only speaks positively to himself in his head. And that was something, that's a hard thing to do. He's like, Mellody, only speak positively to yourself in your head. Never give up. You don't use can't, and you only speak positively. So in the worst of moments, he believes anything is possible. And you've never seen the discipline, ever. I mean, this discipline is insane. And that discipline is where it's like 4 a.m. and I'm getting up to run. And I'm like, I don't want to do it. I want to stop. I'm like, Lewis would get up.
Mellody, give us an example of his discipline.
Lewis's discipline, I mean, from every morsel of food that goes into his mouth, but not in a way that like it's about him. It's just something I have noticed. I know it from being with him, how specific he is about everything. Certainly his workouts, his intensity around things that he do, like play a game with him. You know, he's going to kill you. You know? But the discipline of just, there is no settling and there are no excuses ever. You know, it's like if he lands at a really late hour, you are shocked that he is running at 5 a.m. And he's, you know, and you're like, well, how long did you go? Oh, I went 9 miles. And you're like, you know, you've had 3 hours of sleep or whatever it is. And so he's, you know, just, he has to, because he has to be in such good form to win. So in starting with Ferrari this season, he's like, sis, I want to be in the best shape of my life. So he's been running all these mountains in Colorado.
Wow.
I mean, hard.
That's
and he's
awesome.
just, you know, he's committed to being his best self.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, too, just sticking with Lewis and that sport for a second. It must be such an interesting window for you, not just into him as an athlete, but into watching that sporting business just explode as a media property in America. It obviously was a global sport. It is really like leveled up because of what's happened in America. Drive to Survive. The Netflix
changed
effect.
everything in America.
When you look at something like that, what needs to happen in women's sports?
Well, I think that's part of it, the media piece. But what Drive to Survive did, which was so brilliant, it personalized all the athletes. And once people got to know them, they loved them. I mean, they already loved baseball players, but America especially didn't know those athletes, and they went deep on the personalities and the experience. And for a sport that is far away, middle of the night, all of those things, they bonded the audience. And I think that is coming for women's sports in a big way, besides the fact that the women are excellent in social media. And so they can curry that kind of influence and use that to the benefit of the sport in a very different way. It's coming, and you can just see it.
I mean, you've seen that with the Lynx. I mean, the Lynx are an incredible brand, in part because the players are so engaged, and they're a really good team. I mean, you know, they were in the finals.
They really are. I mean, we've won 4 titles. We almost won our 5th. We lost to the Liberty here in New York. But everything Mellody's saying is exactly right. They're more engaged in social media. We have a huge following.
And you can see the interest in the athletes, the waiting at the locker room,
right?
You know, the outfits, the whole thing, the personalities have come through. And I think that they were always there, but they've broken through with the media interest in a different way in the last few years. And that bodes very, very well for all of the sports.
I do have a question. If you don't mind, I would transition to...
Please.
You sit
it's
on
your
many,
show, bro. Come on,
you sit on many boards, you know, JP Morgan, Starbucks, others. I love the story how you always would sit next to Howard Schultz, who's one of my favorites. And you thought that made you a better investor. But what makes you, or what makes anybody in this room a good director?
They ask questions. I feel very strongly about that. Great directors, and I worked really hard on this. I always say I want to go to every board meeting with 2 original questions, not rhetorical, original. And the questions lead to hopefully breakthrough ideas. In a boardroom, making statements puts people on the defensive, especially if they feel somehow you're, you know, finger wagging or suggesting you know better. You're dropping in maybe 4 or 5 times a year, and the people there are there every single day. So there's nothing worse than the know-it-all. And I remember Satya Nadella, who sat on the Starbucks board, saying he wanted to be a learn-it-all. So the learn-it-all asks a question. You don't presume that you know better. And in asking the question, oftentimes, first of all, it's not the first question that matters, it's the follow-up. I always say it's the secondary and tertiary questions that come from that first question. I think it leads to breakthroughs in boardrooms. And I've worked with the boardrooms I've been in, the people are extremely collegial, and the teams that are the management teams certainly want to win.
So I have a secondary question. You have a tertiary question.
Yeah, exactly.
The secondary question is, and I love this because I was never the best student, but I always tried really hard. And I always thought about, how do you hack the system? Well, you do your homework, you sit in the front row. I mean, when you don't have it, you have to kind of figure it out. My question to you is, why was it so important to sit next to Howard? And what lessons did you learn from that?
Yes, I've told this story that I've been on the board for 20 years.
And what a 20 years for that.
I know,
company.
right?
Goodness.
It's unbelievable. The stock performance, everything, even with the bumps along the way. Tremendous lessons, great lessons in both vision and humility. Really amazing experience where I learned so much. But one of the things I did from the very first board meeting is I sat to Howard's right. In a boardroom where everyone changes seats all the time.
Right.
I made it like, at home you have your chair.
Sure.
Well, that was my chair, even though the other board members sat in different seats. So there's a funny story. Mary Dillon joined our board. She was running Ulta at the time. Now she runs Foot Locker. Great person. Her first board meeting. I walk into the boardroom. She's in my chair.
Oh, boy.
Oh.
And I'm like, and I know Mary from Chicago. I'm like, she's in my chair. And so I literally took a chair. I put it next to Howard. I said, everyone move down. No, everyone said, like, why? Because one of the things about sitting next to him that I wanted to absorb was, what did he react to in a board meeting? And so if someone spoke and said something, I would note, like, why is he writing now? Like, what was said that he thought was important? Or how was he sort of running the meeting? And I literally felt the closer I could sit to him, the more I could learn. And it sounds a little creepy, but I really, for 20 years, I sat in the same seat. Everyone else sat in a different seat. Now, Howard never knew that until I was giving a speech introducing him. And I said out loud, I've sat next to him in this board meeting every single quarter. And he suddenly looked at me and he was like, I said, I wanted to be next to the power, and I wanted to be next to the vision, and I wanted to learn from it in every conceivable way that I could.
Wow.
That is awesome.
You said something a little while ago about Jason Wright and, that sort of, he had a lot of opportunities. I would imagine, and the Broncos story that you told is an interesting example of this too. A lot comes your way. You've been incredibly successful as an investor, as a director, as an executive. When do you say no?
A lot. I've had to get
Why?
better at that. Okay, Warren Buffett, we idolize.
Yeah,
I know
very
you
much.
are very close to him. And we're Warren Buffett disciples at Ariel. And I remember once reading a story where he talked about what real wealth is. And he said, real wealth is a blank calendar.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And then my husband, I think some people know I married Yoda's dad. My husband, Yoda's dad, George does not take meetings. And any meeting that he wants, it's on his terms. He doesn't, and he's like, you fly around the world, you're doing all this stuff. Why do you do that? It's so foreign to him. And he was the one who taught me, like, the most valuable thing you have is time. That is the most valuable thing. And he has a thing on his desk that says, an ounce of gold won't buy a minute of time. Time is the most valuable thing. I think I've come to believe people overvalue money and undervalue time. And so as a result of that, while there are tremendous opportunities that have come to me, and remember, I grew up with nothing, youngest of 6, evicted, phone disconnected, lights turned off. I mean, everything you can imagine happened to me as a child, and that probably led to the hunger and drive that I have in a major, major way, so I wouldn't be me if the bad things hadn't happened. But one of the things about that is I don't take any of these opportunities for granted. I have never been one of these people with swagger. I have sat in a Starbucks board meeting for 20 years and still felt such gratitude to be there. Not that I didn't belong there, that's a different thing, but such appreciation for the opportunity that I was given. And I think when it goes to saying no, then I know how much I lean into things. And because I am an all or nothing kind of person, as I said earlier, go big or go home, I can't say yes to everything because I can't do it that way. You know, in Spinal Tap, they have that line, the dial goes to 11.
Yep.
I kind of live at 11. And so if you live at 11, you could burn yourself out really badly and really fast if you don't control. So I had to learn no. And I love this quote, if you can't decide, the answer is no. Anything I keep pondering, I'm like, it's no. If I can't make, it should be an instant decision, or I know in my heart I shouldn't be doing it.
So, Mellody, you mentioned Warren Buffett. I've been such an enormous beneficiary of great mentorship and friends. My father wasn't around. He left us when I was 10, left my siblings. Similar story, too, as I resonate with your story as being evicted and food stamps and all of that. And I think it's helped me with my grit and my determination through my ups and downs. You mentioned in an interview that I saw a while ago about one of your mentors, Bill Bradley, the NBA Hall of Famer. And he mentioned to you as tough advice, I thought it was real advice, is you don't want to be a ball hog. Can you explain to our audience what that means and why he said that?
Yes. So Bill is very important to me. He's really become a surrogate father. He walked me down the aisle when I got married. Wow. That's a whole nother story. I met him when I was 17 years old and trying to decide between going to Princeton and Harvard. And because of Bill, I went to Princeton.
Wow.
And how he took an interest in me. And John Rogers went to Princeton as well, of course. And I've graduated from college, and I would go and visit Bill at his office. And I'm in his office one day, and he says, you know, Mellody, if you're not careful, you're going to be a ball hog. And it's just like, he just says this to me straight. And I remember sitting there, and I'm maybe 23 years old, and I'm saying to myself in my head, don't cry. Because I wanted to cry. And I was like, if you cry, he's never going to say anything about like this to you again. Don't cry. So I'm telling myself not to cry. I'm trying to be very curious. I'm having a conversation in my head saying, he loves you. Do not be offended. What is he trying to tell you? And he says, you know, you could suck the oxygen out of a room if you're not careful. And I was like, okay. He's like, and so we want to, you know, you want to think about how you be a, you know, whole and thoughtful person. I said, well, how do I do that? He says, I don't know. So he just throws it back at me. And so I'm sitting there thinking, what does he see in me? Why is he saying this? You know, that kind of thing. I know he loves me. What is he thinking? So I get to the street, bawling on the street, crying.
Don't cry yet.
No, don't cry in front of him.
Yeah.
I've cried in front of him plenty of times, but not in that one. Go down to the bottom of the street. I'm crying, and I'm like, okay, what is he telling me? And what could I do to not be what he's saying I could be? And so I decided at that moment that I would always, in every encounter, take an interest in the other person first to take all of the energy off of myself. So if you have spent any time with me, and you have, I will ask you so many questions about your two girls or about your life or anything like that, so I can invest in the other person and they don't feel that I am sucking up the oxygen in the room. People appreciate you taking an interest in them. So it is authentic. It is not some tactic, and it's not a manipulation for me. I learned so much from, it could be the person who picks me up in the lobby going to someone's office. How long have you worked here? Where do you live? You're right out of school. Where did you go? Lots of things like that. People really do like you taking an interest in them, and you learn stuff. And so that pushing me in that moment really changed how I show up for people. And it led to my whole belief about asking questions instead of making statements.
Love that.
All right, so we're going to end up by asking you some questions, rapid fire. So we'll bounce it back and forth. What's one word to describe your deal-making style?
Long term.
What's more important, your gut or data?
Gut.
Who's your dream deal-making partner?
Jason.
Jason who?
Right.
Oh,
damn it. I was going to say, we have breaking news.
I was like,
on
this
the
interview
deal.
went so well.
He said deal making.
I know, but I mean, maybe I made an
this is the
impression.
deal.
Just in terms of deals, investing is John in terms of public companies.
Okay.
Mellody, question number 4. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received on deal making or business?
Don't ever make an important decision based upon money.
What's the worst advice you've ever been given?
Make yourself seen or heard.
There's a good one. You ready for this one? What's your hype song before a big meeting or negotiation?
I will survive.
What's the most important trait you look for in a board member?
Ethics, smarts, and team player. They can get along with the other people in the room.
You can only watch one sport for the rest of your life. Which one is it?
F1.
Whoa, okay. That's the first time we've gotten that.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Good deal.
What team do you want to see win a championship more than any?
Mine.
Whichever one that may be, because now you've got a few. This has been incredible.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Thank you,
we
Mellody.
really
I
appreciate
admire
it.
you both. Thank you.
All right.
so much.
Mellody Hobson, everyone. Thank you.
The Deal is a production from Bloomberg Podcasts and Bloomberg Originals. The Deal is hosted by Alex Rodriguez and Jason Kelly. This show was produced by Anna Mazarakis, Lizzie Phillip, and Stacey Wong. Original music and engineering by Blake Maples. David E. Ravella is our managing editor. Our executive producers are Jason Kelly, Brendan Francis Newnham, Jordan Opplinger, Trey Shallowhorn, Andrew Barden, Kelly LaFerriere, and Ashley Honig. Sage Bauman is our head of podcasts. Special thanks to Rachel Carnevale, Elena Sausangelis, Nick Silva, Adrian Toscano, Stephen Craig, Mark Dawson, Jennifer Yelverton, Micah Rondo, Stephen Fosberg, Patrick Cairns, Billy Church, and Black House. Rubab Shakir is our creative director. Art direction is from Jacqueline Kessler. Joshua DeVoe is our director of photography. Camera operation by Crystal Jefferson and Holly Fisher. Listen to The Deal on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also tune into the video companion on Bloomberg Originals and on Bloomberg TV. Thanks for listening.